Welcome to the Intel Hub News Brief, uncovering the cold hard truth that the corporate media just can't handle. A service of the IntelHub.com. Now, here's Joe Joseph from Freedom Link Radio and Popeye from Federal Jack.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Intel Hub News Brief. This edition is a special edition. We're going to have a roundtable discussion today, and I'm bringing together a group of individuals that some of you may not have gotten a chance to hear from ever or sporadically, and I'd like to get all of their opinions in one area. I'd like to get them all in one area and get their opinions. So tonight I have with me Tim Watts from the Freedom Link Radio program. Tim.
Popeye. What's up, dude?
John King. John, you're from the Freedom Link Radio program as well, frequent contributor. Say hello.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Popeye. Hi, Tim.
And last but definitely not least, the first lady of the Freedom Link Radio program, Miss Angie Joseph. Angie, hello, dear.
Hey, Popeye.
So,
serious stuff.
What is going on? Obama apparently signed an executive order on Friday, I believe it was, the 16th of March, titled, what is the title of it? Let me read the proper title of it. The National Defense Resources Preparedness. But that actually just says National Defense Resources Preparedness. It doesn't even say, it just says Executive Order - National Defense Resources Preparedness. No number, no nothing. No, usually there's a designation number after it. Nothing, nada. I don't see anything. All I see is this title. When I read through it, what I see is it should be titled is Obama issues executive order declaring peacetime martial law, bypasses Congress and takes over all resources. So you've done a lot of research into this. You've spent the past, I'd say, 4 or 5 hours just tearing this thing apart and going over it piece by piece. And every time you found something new, it was just more incredibly Orwellian. So why don't you go ahead and break it down for the listeners exactly what the bill is, and then we can get into each thing and break it down piece by piece.
Alrighty. Well, first we should mention that this executive order, which was issued yesterday by the White House, you can find it on the White House website at whitehouse.gov. And it comes on the heels of the White House having announced on, what was it, Wednesday? I believe they actually released it on Tuesday night, the 13th. But on Wednesday, we got the announcement of the creation of FEMA Corps. And if you have not had a chance to look into the FEMA Corps announcement, I would highly suggest doing it because it really goes hand in hand with this executive order. Let's not forget also that last night on your show, Popeye, you and Joe, my husband, discussed the fact that the government just bought 450 million rounds of 40 cal ammo. Now, when we talked about that last night before we even became aware of this executive order, I had said sort of in a passing statement, I wonder what groups they're getting ready to arm now. And it turns out that, that comment may have been more accurate than I thought. So anyway, this executive order, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start reading it, and then I will break down as necessary what the sections mean, what he's actually saying here in this order. So it starts off that by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, including the Defense Production Act of 1950 and Section 301 he's citing that Defense Production Act, United States Code, and as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States, it's hereby ordered as follows. Part 1 discusses purpose, policy, and implementation. So Section 101, purpose. This order delegates authorities and addresses national defense resources policies and programs under the Defense Production Act of 1950. as amended, the Act. That's how it will be referred to throughout the course of this order. Section 102, policy. The United States must have an industrial and technological base capable of meeting national defense requirements and capable of contributing to the technological superiority of its national defense equipment in peacetime and in times of national emergency. So he's saying that this can go into effect essentially anytime he says so. We do not have to be at war. There does not need to be a threat. He's talking about what essentially amounts to a peacetime martial law, uh, I guess, establishment. So
That's what I get from it. It sounds like peacetime martial law because he says anytime, correct? It's not just time of national emergency. It's pretty much any time.
in peacetime and in times of a national emergency. So he's making a distinction between the two. So no, peacetime is absolutely on the table. The domestic and industrial and technological base is the foundation for national defense preparedness. The authorities provided in the Act shall be used to strengthen this base and ensure it is capable of responding to the national defense needs of the United States. So what we're going to do is continue on to explain that this is framing a situation whereas the United States would have to sustain itself under situations where, say, for example, all imports were to be stopped tomorrow, or some sort of hostilities where we no longer had access to any outside resources, or if the if things were going to be the supply interrupted, or even credit default. So under section 103, the next section here, general functions. Scroll down a little bit. Executive departments and agencies responsible for plans and programs relating to national defense as defined in section 801 of this order, or for resources and services needed to support such plans and programs shall A, identify requirements for the full spectrum of emergencies, including essential military and civilian demand. So this all has to support both the military and the civilian needs. B, assess on an ongoing basis. In other words, this is a long-term establishment here, and they're going to have to reassess situations as time goes on. Assess on an ongoing basis the capability of the domestic, industrial, and technological base to satisfy requirements in peacetime and times of national emergencies, specifically evaluating the availability of the most critical resources and production sources, including subcontractors and suppliers, materials, skilled labor, and the professional and technical personnel. So this goes over all resources. What we're talking about here is a complete takeover of everything and everyone in the country. And that's literal. I mean, I literally cannot possibly overstate the fact that this is not just talking about resources. We're talking about public, private, commercial resources, which includes human resources, uh, essentially, as you'll see as we go
Slave
on
labor.
here. Yes, the establishment of a slave labor workforce. And he makes no bones about it in this order, specifies it. It says C, be prepared in the event of a potential threat to the security of the United States to take actions necessary to ensure the availability of adequate resources and production capability, including services and critical technology for national defense requirements. Now, we're going to get into the definitions of some of these phrases towards the end of the document so that we'll understand what they mean when they say national defense requirements and critical technology and so on and so forth. But critical technology really, it refers to both any kind of technological equipment, capabilities. You'll see later that they include NASA in this. I mean, everything. So it's also referring to things necessary for technological function, such as rare earth resources and minerals, all of those resources that computers use, like cadmium and lithium and neodymium and all of those things, even silver, precious metals, you name it.
And let me remind you of what happens when this country needs lithium, Angie. One of the biggest things in abundance in Afghanistan is lithium.
Right.
So it's not just the opium that we're in that country for.
Oh, no.
We're in there for other reasons too. So I can just imagine, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I can just
No.
imagine. But when I didn't even realize it mentioned lithium until you literally just brought it up now. So again, ladies and gentlemen, this thing is so massive. It's unbelievable. Go ahead, Ange.
I also want to stress that what I just read talks about, and you'll see as we go on, it gets into a little more detail about this, but it talks about potentially taking over resources, natural resources outside of the United States to ensure that we have a steady supply of all available materials. I mean, it specifies that. So I'm going to reread this section so that you understand what's being said here. And it was section 103, part C. Be prepared in the event of a potential threat to the security of the United States, which means that, say we get into a tiff with China or Africa, and they say to us, well, we're not going to export any of our rare earth minerals to you anymore. This is what this is talking about. So, be prepared in the event of a potential threat to the security of the United States to take actions necessary, military action, to ensure the availability of adequate resources and production capability, including services, that means labor, and critical technology for national defense requirements. D, improve the efficiency and responsiveness of the domestic industrial base to support national defense requirements. And E, foster cooperation between the defense and commercial sectors. Okay, we're talking about military force here. The military will be used to take over commercial sectors of business. So foster cooperation, it's a deceptive word, between the defense and commercial sectors for research and development and for acquisition of materials, they're going to steal things, services, components, and equipment to enhance industrial base efficiency and responsiveness. In other words, they'll take whatever they want, whenever they want, by military force to ensure that the military and domestic needs of the nation are met. Okay, section 104, implementation. What do you guys think about that section I just read?
Well, that's just ridiculous. It's like, are we living in a movie that I watched in the 80s, like some dystopian science fiction movie or something? Because this is illegal. This is completely unconstitutional, illegal, seditious, and treasonous.
You guys, when you look at what they're doing, it just makes you realize, they're expecting something really dramatic here. I mean, because this is like Popeye said, this is so off the edge. This is so off the chain, whatever you want to call it, with what they're doing. They're expecting something huge. And all these things are coming along at the same time, which is kind of interesting. And this very much seems to dovetail with that FEMA COG thing that you and Joe uncovered as well, Angie.
Yes, with the red force, blue force
Yep.
specifications, right?
Well, what are they worried about? That they're making contingencies for all trade being cut off with the United States. What do you plan on doing?
Exactly.
That plans on getting us cut off from the rest of the world.
Right. Well, not only that, but I mean, this could be in response to a future plan to invade, say, Iran.
Oh yeah, or with
But
Iran, Syria, World War III, anything that they
right,
could start.
yeah. And let's not forget about what just happened with Leon Panetta and the general. What was his name? the head of the
Oh, Martin Dempsey. Yeah, they pretty much
yes, Dempsey.
told Congress that they were ceremonial the other day, and that they would go seek international permission to attack Syria, and then they would come back and let Congress know what they were going to do.
This is exactly the same thing. This even talks about, first of all, the only mention of Congress in this entire order uh, is one little section that talks about manufacturing a report for Congress periodically. In other words, they're going to let Congress know what's going on, but they're certainly not asking their permission, and Congress has no power over anything that they're going to be saying or doing. You'll see that Obama appoints all kinds of advisors and directors that are cabinet level at his whim to do all of this bidding that he's getting ready to institute here. So section 104, and here we're about to get into that. Implementation. Part A, the National Security Council and Homeland Security Council, in conjunction with the National Economic Council, shall serve as the integrated policy-making forum for consideration and formulation of national defense resources preparedness policy, and shall make recommendations to the President on the use of authorities under the Act. He's saying that they are doing away with the Congress completely, that the National Security Council, Homeland Security Council, along with the National Economic Council, will be the policy-making forum for consideration and formulation of this National Defense Resource Preparedness policy. They're not asking Congress. They're going to be telling Congress what they're doing, not asking. And to carry out this ridiculous plan, he's going to be using the National Security Council and Homeland Security Council, as well as the National Economic Council, for the purposes of, financial decisions, funding, and so on and so forth, because of course Congress won't be able to be the entity that approves funding and whatnot for all of this, fund that he's got planned for the United States here. Section B, the Secretary of Homeland Security shall, 1, advise the President on issues of national defense resources preparedness and on the use of the authorities and functions delegated by this order. 2, provide for the central coordination and plans and programs incident to authorities and functions delegated under this order, and provide guidance to agencies assigned functions under this order, developed in consultation with such agencies, and 3, report to the President periodically concerning all program activities conducted pursuant to this order. This sounds a lot to me like, if you've ever seen a documentary about what happened in Nazi Germany, and Hitler had all of his advisors doing his bidding and carrying out his macabre orders. Their job was to carry out the orders as he specified and report back to him on what was going on. And it sounds a lot like what's happening here. The dictator in chief, as he so appoints himself.
Well, again, this all he's playing off stuff that Bush put into power back when he was the president, and
Right.
he's setting himself up for the future or any other future president, because this all sounds like a play off PDD 51, where
Right.
it says pretty much in PDD 51 that the president is a dictator and Congress is ceremonial.
Right. But this order just takes everything to the next level. And I have yet to discover whether or not there's any classified sections of this order yet, just as there were in PDD 51. There may very well be sections of this order that are classified. I have not had a chance to look into that yet. I've been, since 1 o'clock in the morning this morning, have just been poring over this thing, trying to figure out what it all means. So one of the other jobs that they're going to be doing is prepare and coordinate the annual report. Annual report. That means that this is something that's going to be implemented and permanent for at least an extended period of time, since it's going to require annual reporting to the Congress. We're talking about complete takeover, a coup, a militaristic coup, and it's going to be something that's structured going forward to where it's going to require annual and periodic reporting.
I think it's funny that they're saying they're going to report to Congress. Like, what's the point? You guys are completely bypassing them, so why even bother reporting to them? It's like pissing in their faces at this point.
Right, basically. You know, who knows why they're going to do that? Maybe, you know, just to piss everybody off, or I don't know. I don't know what the intention is behind that, but maybe that's what their lawyers said they have to do in order to pull this whole illegal, treasonous, seditious thing off. This is a permanent restructuring of the government of the United States. It's the complete dissolution of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, uh, everything that this country was founded on. The law of our land is going to be totally dissolved under this order and reestablished according to Obama, his orders. And you know, it really doesn't matter who's in there. Obama, Romney, you name it, it doesn't matter. They're just carrying out orders for, I guess, the elitists above them that are calling the shots here. Part D, the Secretary of Commerce, in cooperation with the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and other agencies shall 1. Analyze potential effects of national emergencies on actual production capability, taking into account the entire production system. That's the whole country, everything that gets produced here, the whole thing, including shortages of resources, and develop recommended preparedness measures to strengthen capabilities for production increases in national emergencies, and to perform industry analyses to assess capabilities of the industrial base to support the national defense, and develop policy recommendations to improve the international competitiveness of specific domestic industries and their abilities to meet national defense program needs. Okay, part 2, priorities and allocations. Section 201, priorities and allocations authorities. The authority of the President, conferred by Section 101 of the Act, and it specifies the section, to require acceptance and priority performance of contracts or orders other than contracts of employment, to promote the national defense over performance of any other contracts or orders, and to allocate materials, services, and facilities as deemed necessary or appropriate to promote the national defense is delegated the following agency heads. Now, I have to stop and discuss what this is talking about here for those that don't understand. I'm going to reread it and explain it in detail. The authority of the President to require acceptance and priority performance of contracts or orders other than contracts of employment, to promote the national defense over performance of any other contracts or orders, and allocate material, services, and facilities deemed necessary or appropriate to promote the national defense. What he's talking about is a complete takeover of every business that they want to take over, that they say has a function in carrying out the needs of the national defense, and to require acceptance of the government's work orders as priority performance of contracts. In other words, any work that any of these companies or businesses or farms or banks or you name it, anything that people are currently doing to make a living, the contracts of business that they currently have and you know, are fulfilling are ceased. They no longer have priority over the jobs that the government gives it to do. So, and then it delegates authority to enforce this usurpation of authority, okay? To promote the national defense over performance of any other contracts or orders, and allocate material, services, and facilities. That's a takeover of everything. Business, materials, services, facilities, you name it. They no longer work for themselves. They're no longer, this is a
Yeah,
national.
like say there's a steel mill. Not that there's many left in this country, but say there's a steel mill. Under this, the government comes rolls up one day with armed troops and
Right.
physically takes over the entire steel mill and says, we need this now for us. It's no longer the profits don't go to you. None of the steel, nothing goes to you. No, all this is controlled and maintained by the government, for the better of this country.
That's exactly right. That's what this is talking about.
They
Hitler
would just
did that
come
too,
in
by the
and
way.
nationalize.
Yeah, that's like Stalin and Hitler. What did you say, Tim?
Right.
They would just come in and nationalize everything.
Yeah,
That's
that's
right.
pretty much what it sounds like.
That's exactly what they're doing. Okay, now the authority to enforce this is delegated to the following agency heads. 1, the Secretary of Agriculture with respect to food resources, food resource facilities, livestock resources, veterinary resources, plant health resources, the domestic distribution of farm equipment and commercial fertilizer. They're taking over anything that has anything to do with food production at all, period. Or fertilizer production and distribution. The Secretary of Energy with respect to all forms of energy, the Secretary of Health and Human Services with respect to health resources, and you'll see that this is the nationalization of the medical, the entire medical industry. They talk later on about taking over all facilities that have to do with medicine at all. Drugstores, hospitals, you name it, it's going to be under the control of the Secretary of Health and Human Services under the authority of President Obama. And by the way, he delegates all of these heads presidential authority. You'll hear that as well. So the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Secretary of Transportation with respect to all forms of transportation, including your vehicle, by the way, the Secretary of Defense with respect to water resources. In other words, the military is going to be in control of all water resources, all of it, your well, your standing water in your yard, you name it, the water pipes under your property. They're taking control of everything, and it's going to be under the direction of the Secretary of Defense.
And who would they be taking their marching orders from in the future? Probably some world government.
Right.
And if you know anything about the law of the sea, it's a treaty that the UN, that the United States has been being pushed into ratifying for years now. And every administration, I think since the Clinton administration, has been pushed to, it has pushed Congress to ratify, and it hasn't been ratified yet. But this pretty much would do an end run around it, because now you have them controlling everything. So it doesn't matter. All they have to do is get marching orders from somebody else, and they'll say, okay, troops, go do this. It's compartmentalization. So it's, to me, this is an end run around a lot of things. And then, through force, they'll just have all these treaties signed. So, quote unquote, it's official on the books. And then, boom, march right into tyranny.
Right. And don't forget, I mean, this also includes all aquifers and everything else under military control. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. 6, the Secretary of Commerce with respect to all other materials, services, and facilities, including construction materials. That means people, a labor force, facilities, place to work, construction materials, you name it, the Secretary of Commerce is going to be in control of everything. Okay, not the boss at your job, not yourself if you're self-employed. No, the Secretary of Commerce is now your daddy. Okay, Section B, the Secretary of each agency delegated authority under subsection A of this section, resource departments, shall plan for and issue regulations to prioritize and allocate resources and establish standards and procedures by which the authority shall be used to promote the national defense under both emergency and non-emergency conditions. Nationalization of everything under emergencies or peacetime, non-emergency conditions. Now, I mean, he's talking about implementing this now, changing the very fiber of this country. Each secretary shall authorize the heads of other agencies as appropriate to place priority ratings on contracts and orders for materials, services, and facilities needed in support of programs approved under Section 202 of this order. C, Each resource department shall act as necessary and appropriate upon requests for special priorities assistance. In other words, whatever they say is a priority, the department has to act upon, as defined in Section 801 of this order, in a time frame consistent with the urgency of the need at hand. Okay? When we say jump, you're going to say how high, and not waste a second doing it. In situations where there are competing program requirements for limited resources, the resource department shall consult with the secretary who made the required determination under Section 202 of this order. Such secretary shall coordinate with and identify for the resource department which program requirements to prioritize on the basis of operational urgency. In situations involving more than one secretary making such a required determination under Section 202, the secretary shall coordinate with and identify for the resource department which program requirements should receive priority on the basis of operational urgency. If agreement cannot be reached between two such secretaries, then the issue shall be referred to the President through the Assistant to the President and National Security Advisor, and to the Assistant to the President for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism. So let me explain to you what this means. This means that if anybody resists this program, then you will be referred to the President, his advisors, and the President for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism. If you resist, you're a terrorist and will be treated as a terrorist. Okay, that's what we're saying here. That's what he's talking about.
You know, all this is just unbelievable, Angie. And you think that with all this stuff that you're reading off, that under what disaster scenario does this take place?
No,
but then
Tim.
I know, I'm getting to that. You realize suddenly that it says in peacetime.
Right.
And so you're like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, you shake your head. Unbelievable.
I mean, I'm just speechless about the degree of treason that's going on here. Let me tell you something. This damn well better result in his impeachment, as well as the revocation of any law that he's put into practice, including this apostasy, and the removal of any of his appointees in the court, cabinet level, you name it. I mean, it's time to clean house. This is enough. This is enough. Listen, we have natural rights. They are not up for a vote. They're not given to us by any government authority, and they cannot be taken from us by any government authority. And if we allow this to happen, we've got no one to blame but ourselves. This is the SHTF situation. It's hitting the fan as we speak. And if we do not resist this, if we do not fight against this, if we do not work to slap these people in irons, then it's going to be hell on earth in this country. Okay, this also goes a little bit further than that. As we read on, you'll see that this expands to other countries as well, in order to ensure the availability of any resources that we need. Unbelievable, unbelievable. So in Section E, the secretary of each resource department, when necessary, shall make the finding required under Section 101 of the Act, 50 U.S.C., so on and so on. This finding shall be submitted for the President's approval through the Assistant to the President, which, by the way, we don't know who the Assistant to the President is yet. I have yet to see this person named. And National Security Advisor, and the Assistant to the President for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism. Every time I see that word, my blood just literally boils. I mean, that they're literally going to treat everybody that resists this as a terrorist.
You're either with us or you're
Right.
with the terrorists, Angie.
Exactly right. Upon such approval, the Secretary of the Resource Department that made the finding may use the authority of Section so on and so on, to control the general distribution of any material, including applicable services in the civilian market. Okay. Section 202, determinations, except as provided in Section 201E of this order, which we just read, The authority delegated by Section 201 of this order may be used only to support programs that have been determined in writing as necessary or appropriate to promote the national defense. What does that mean? That means that if a program exists or a business exists that does not promote the national defense, then it will not be supported. Okay? Uh, A, by the Secretary of Defense with respect to military production and construction, military assistance to foreign nations, military use of civil transportation. You're talking about military everywhere using civil transportation, okay? Stockpiles managed by the Department of Defense, space, and directly related activities. I'm going to read that again. The authority delegated by Section 201 of this order may be used only to support programs that have been determined in writing as necessary or appropriate to promote the national defense by the Secretary of Defense, we're talking about military control, with respect to military production and construction, military assistance to foreign nations, military use of civil transportation, stockpiles managed by the Department of Defense, that we're talking about stockpiles of all these things that this order describes, all of personal belongings, resources, you name it, that they're going to be stealing from everybody and putting under the control of the military. Space resources and directly related activities, okay? B, the Secretary of Energy with respect to energy production and construction, distribution and use, and directly related activities, takeover of everything and anything energy related. If you got solar panels on your barn, on your house, if you happen to have a windmill, you name it, they're taking over control of it and giving it, putting it under the Secretary of Energy. He's going to be your
There's
boss.
nobody that this doesn't affect. So when people,
Right.
if somebody is out there saying, "Well, this doesn't affect me because I'm not blah 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 blah," no, this affects you. I don't
Yeah.
care if you breathe air and you
Right.
drink water and you eat food to survive,
This
this
affects
affects
you.
you. Okay, if you live in
Exactly.
the United States anywhere, this affects you.
They're talking about controlling, not just controlling the resources and the production, but also distribution. You know what that means? Rationing, okay? That's what they're talking about here. You will no longer go to the store and buy your groceries. No, you will be rationed food, water, energy, you name it.
Agenda 21.
Worse than that. I mean, this is
Well,
unbelievable.
this is all part of it. This is how you bring in things like that.
Yep.
This is
Right.
it's all connected. It,
Yep.
you know, Joe and I did a show about Agenda 21. We did a podcast on it and two subsequent shows because it was so huge. And we played this clip about this planned city that they had in the future called Plannedopolis, and that was the same thing. They had ration cards, basically for certain things like meat. They went to
Right.
the store. They didn't have meat. Most things were like potatoes and
Right.
peas and stuff like that.
Rice,
But yeah, and rice and stuff like that, all
beans,
mixed
right.
together. Some sort of like mash pie or whatever, and that was it. And then like she goes, "Oh, we're not getting meat. He, silly. It's not your birthday."
Right. Yes.
And they had calorie cards, basically, like how many calorie, the amount of outdoor activity or whatever they could do,
Yep.
because they only had a certain amount of calories that they could get each day,
Right.
and you didn't want to do more stuff than you could to burn more. It's just insane. It's Orwellian, and here you have it in writing, the very basis for things like that to happen.
I mean, that's what we're talking about. And remember, further up, it specified that the Secretary of Agriculture will be in control of you know, um, the acquisition, use of, distribution, employment, everything of anything that's food related, livestock, you name it, plant related, everything. I mean, everything. You will not be able to go outside and gather your own food. It's this bad, really. I'm not exaggerating. I recommend everybody print this out, read it several times, and share it with everybody you know. If they're not interested, make them interested. Okay? Section 203, maximizing domestic energy supplies. Okay, which the only way to maximize the supplies, according to them, is through rationing. Okay, the authorities of the president under Section 101 specifies the sections, are delegated to the Secretary of Commerce, with the exception that the authority to make findings that materials, including equipment, services, and facilities, are critical and essential, as described in specified section, is delegated to the Secretary of Energy. Section 204, Chemical and Biological Warfare. The authority of the President, conferred by Section 104B of the Act, specifies the section, is delegated to the Secretary of Defense. By the way, what that means is the authority of the President under Section such and such is delegated to the Secretary of Defense. This means that the Secretary of Defense has presidential authority, okay? This authority may not be further delegated by the Secretary. So the Secretary cannot allow anybody under him to give him orders or make decisions. Okay, that means Congress, Senate, anything. Okay,
Why did they only mention chemical and biological? Why not nuclear or general warfare? They only specify two. Why?
exactly. Why?
Well,
It's
what do they plan on? I mean, besides for starting World War III and all that, John brings up a good point. Why are they specifying only certain types of things? Are they also getting people prepared for a upcoming false flag event to be
Well,
used?
no, listen. What this says is that the Secretary of Defense is in control, in total and complete control of chemical and biological warfare. That means that if the President or the Secretary of Defense thinks that it would be beneficial to launch a chemical attack or biological attack on a certain sector of resistors or the populace or a country or whatever, that they don't have to let the Congress know. They don't have to ask permission from anybody. They're going to do it because the Secretary of Defense has presidential authority. Okay, this is what we're talking about. Okay, uh, horrifying. It doesn't even begin to describe how troubling this is, how troubling this authority is. And by the way, we're talking about illegitimate authority that doesn't need to be recognized, should not be recognized because it is illegal. Okay?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Angie. That's an excellent point.
The president should be arrested immediately over
Yeah,
this.
just
I mean,
because somebody puts on a plastic badge and runs around and says, I'm a cop, or I'm a security guard, or whatever, or I'm in charge, I'm God, I have power, doesn't mean you have any sort of authority. In reality, if it violates the Constitution, it is null and void. It specifically states that in the Constitution, that
that's
laws
right.
cannot be made that violate the Constitution. And if they are made and implemented, they are illegal and unconstitutional. And it is the duty of the citizenry to not partake in that law. I mean, this
Not
is all common sense, ladies and gentlemen. But hey, I'm an extremist because I actually read the rule book that came with the country that the founding fathers gave us. I know, call me crazy. I read the instruction manual.
not just that, Popeye, but the Declaration of Independence says that whenever a government becomes destructive of the means of living a life of, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, so on and so on, that it is our right and duty to alter or abolish it and institute a new government that would be respectful of our rights. Um, I don't even know how to begin to describe uh, the severity of what's being laid out here. Section that was section 204, chemical and biological warfare. Part 3. By the way, no individual or individual appointee should ever have complete discretionary authority to launch chemical and biological attacks. Never. There needs to be review, there needs to be
Who
debate,
are the
there
real
needs to be
terrorists here?
discussion.
Who are
The,
the real friggin' terrorists? For
the,
real. Who are
yeah,
the real terrorists?
this is absolutely terroristic. Absolutely. So part 3, the expansion of productive capacity and supply. Section 301, loan guarantees. Well, what we're about to read is the nationalization of every financial institution. Okay? That means the government is taking over all the financial institutions, and they're going to be calling the shots and laying out the rules. Okay? Loan guarantees. A, to reduce current or projected shortfalls of resources, critical technology items, or materials essential for the national defense, the head of each agency engaged in procurement for the national defense as defined in Section 801H of this order is authorized pursuant to Section 301, blah, 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 to guarantee loans by private institutions. Each guaranteeing agency is designated and authorized to 1, act as a fiscal agent in the making of its own guarantee contracts and in otherwise carrying out the purposes of Section 301 of the Act, and 2, contract with any Federal Reserve Bank to assist the agency in serving as fiscal agent. So the Federal Reserve Bank will be working with and in control of the private banking institutions and you know, the carrying out of these contracts, these loan contracts and guarantees. Unbelievable, unbelievably disturbing.
The fact that they're going from like one end of the spectrum to the other just shows you that they're trying to control everything. They're trying to put their little greasy, greedy fingers in every little aspect to control every aspect of our lives, everything.
So yeah, they're going to be contracting with Federal Reserve banks to assist in serving as a fiscal agent. Federal Reserve is going to assist the banks in how to be a fiscal agent. Part C, terms and conditions of guarantees under this authority shall be determined in consultation with the Secretary of Treasury and the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, otherwise referred to as the OMB. That's the Office of Management and Budget. Okay? Secretary of the Treasury and the Director of the Office of Management and Budget will be the authority that will be in control of the financial institutions. The guaranteeing agency is authorized following such consultation to prescribe 1, either specifically or by maximum limits or otherwise, rates of interest, guarantee and commitment fees, and other charges which may be made in connection with such guarantee contracts, and 2, regulations governing the forms and procedures which shall be uniform to the extent practicable to be utilized in connection therewith. They're going to be calling the shots in the economy, okay? Section 302, loans. To reduce current or projected shortfalls of resources, critical technology items, or materials essential for the national defense, the head of each agency engaged in procurement, stealing, for the national defense is delegated the authority of the president, okay? Again, they're given presidential authority, which also means they have executive immunity, by the way. They can engage in whatever kind of criminal activity they want to, and they've got the authority and immunity of the executive. So they should be delegated the authority to make loans thereunder. Terms and conditions of loans under this authority shall be determined in consultation with the Secretary of the Treasury and the Director of OMB. The government will be controlling terms and conditions of loan practices. Okay. Section 303, additional authorities. To create, maintain, protect, expand, or restore domestic industrial base capabilities essential for the national defense, the head of each agency engaged in procurement for the national defense is delegated the authority of the President to make provision for purchases of or commitments to purchase an industrial resource or critical technology item for government use or resale, and to make provision for the development of production capabilities and for the increased use of emerging technologies in security program applications, and to enable rapid transition of emerging technologies. Control over technology. B, materials acquired under Section 301. Acquired is a nice way to say stolen or
Yeah, the Nazis
confiscated.
acquired paintings and stuff as they looted the shit out of Europe, too.
Right, exactly. Yeah, all of their acquisitions are things they're taking from people. So materials acquired under Section 303 of the Act that exceeds the needs of the programs under the Act may be transferred to the National Defense Stockpile. So if they take if they take things they don't need or more than they need, they're not going to give it back to you. They're going to transfer it to the National Defense Stockpile. If, in the judgment of the Secretary of Defense as the National Defense Stockpile Manager, so the Secretary of Defense will be managing our stockpiles of loot, such transfers are in the public interest. So if he says that stockpiling all of your belongings is in the public interest, that's what they're going to do. Section 304, subsidy payments. This means that they may or may not decide to give you a little bit of money for your things. If they do, they'll determine how much they're going to give you, and that's going to be that. To ensure the supply of raw or non-processed materials, okay, this is where we're talking about things that are produced outside of the United States that we may or may not have access to. To ensure the supply of raw or unprocessed materials from high-cost sources, or to ensure maximum production or supply in any area at stable prices of any materials in light of a temporary increase in transportation costs, the head of each agency engaged in procurement for the national defense is delegated the authority of the President to make subsidy payments after consultation with the Secretary of Treasury and the Director of OMB. Section 305, Determinations and Findings. Pursuant to budget authority provided by an Appropriations Act in advance for credit assistance under Section 301 or 302 of the Act, and consistent with Federal Credit Reform Act of 1990, as amended. In other words, they're going to call it FCRA throughout this. The head of each agency engaged in procurement for the national defense is delegated the presidential authority to make determinations set forth in sections, it specifies the sections, in consultation with the secretary making the required determination, that such determination shall be made after due consideration of the provisions from OMB and the credit subsidy score of the relevant loan or loan guarantee as approved by the OMB pursuant to the FCRA. So they will be telling you, they're going to be dictating financial policy. They're going to tell you what they're going to pay for things if they decide to pay for things, and so on and so forth. And they have the sole discretionary authority to make all of those determinations. That's what that means. B, other than any determination by the president under section so on of the act, the head of each agency engaged in procurement, again, is given presidential determination, presidential authority to make required determinations, judgments, certifications, findings, and notifications. So they'll decide whether or not they're going to notify people of things. Defined under, gives the section, in consultation with the secretary making the required determination under section 202 of this order. Section 306, strategic and critical materials. The Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of the Interior, in consultation with the Secretary of Defense as the National Defense Stockpile Manager, are each delegated the authority of the President, gives the section, to encourage the exploration. In other words, under military authority, they're going to encourage exploration, development, and mining of strategic and critical materials and other materials. So we will militarily encourage other people to cooperate with us for the exploration. In other words, we're going to find the resources we want, development and mining of the strategic and critical materials and other materials. You guys have 2 cents to contribute about that?
Oh, that's amazing. You know, everything we do is a resource grab anyway. So this doesn't surprise me in the least. But, you know, the scope and the severity of everything that's involved in this entire, you know, executive order is just It's
It's so huge, dude.
yeah,
It's vast. I don't even know how else to explain it. I know what you
yeah.
mean. It's like the Grand Canyon of executive orders
They,
when it comes to
they just
martial
keep
law.
piling on us. They keep piling on. You know, we had NDAA, which was big enough already. Then we had HR 658 with the drones. You know, we got the SIP with the Strategic Implementation Plan, and now this. It's like, holy cow, these guys mean business.
Anyone else still think that they're not trying to create a police state?
Yeah,
Don't
you'd have to be
forget,
freaking blind.
the NDAA gave them authority to, basically take people and permanently detain them without due process or anything else.
Well,
And
let me rephrase. Hold on. Let's fix that.
sure,
It. They think it gave them the authority.
right, right, exactly,
Constitutionally, it didn't give them the authority to do anything. And as far as I'm concerned, that's null and void. So is this and everything else. But
sure.
I know what you mean. Go on.
Yeah, carrying it out is another story, right?
Exactly.
Um, so there's that, and as we'll see here, their intent, just a couple of days ago, they announced the creation of FEMA labor corps, that or serving service corps that people will serve and be inscripted to serve. Um, and then this comes out, and later on we'll see that they, are talking about slave labor, literally slave labor. It's not an exaggeration. Section 307, substitutes. The head of each agency engaged in procurement for the national defense is given presidential authority to make provision for the development of substitutes for strategic and critical materials, critical components, critical technology items, and other resources to aid the national defense. What that means is that they will have to provide um, substitutes for certain things that we do not have access to in this country, but that we need. They're talking about rare earth elements and things like that are predominantly mined in other countries, like things like lithium, cadmium, neodymium. We use silver in technology, gold, all kinds of resources. So they also want to develop substitutions that they can use when, for whatever reason, we cannot get to certain resources, certain what they call critical materials, critical components, critical technology items, and other resources to aid the national defense. Section 308, government-owned equipment. The heads of each agency engaged in the procurement for the national defense is delegated presidential authority to A, procure and install additional equipment, facilities, processes, or improvements to plants, factories, and other industrial facilities owned by the federal government, and to procure and install government-owned equipment in plants, factories, and other industrial facilities owned by private persons. Government-owned equipment, that means that they will be installing probably a lot of spy technology and control technology in private industrial facilities, plants, factories. So I'm going to read that again so that you make sure that everybody understands what this is saying. Procure and install additional equipment, facilities. In other words, if they want some of their people in your facility, inspectors on a regular basis to make sure that you're serving the government like a nice little slave, then you have to have those facilities incorporated into your place of business. So additional equipment, facilities, processes, that basically means programs and so on and so forth, technological implementation programs, or improvements to plants, factories, and other industrial facilities, and to procure and install government-owned equipment in plants, factories, and other industrial facilities owned by private persons. Again, nationalization of everything, including private businesses and anything they want. They're going to take it. B, provide for the modification or expansion of privately owned facilities, including the modification or improvement of production processes when taking actions under sections 301, 302, and it specifies the section, and sell or otherwise transfer equipment owned by the federal government if there's things that they're telling a plant owner that need to be installed in their plant, they will sell it to you. You have to buy it, okay? No, you don't have the option of saying no. You're going to have to buy it. So sell or otherwise transfer equipment owned by the federal government and installed under Section 303E of this Act to the owners of such plants, factories, and other industrial facilities. Okay. Section 309, Defense Production Act Fund. Okay. The Secretary of Defense is designed the Defense Production Act Fund manager in accordance with Section 304 of this Act, and shall carry out the duties specified in Section 304 of the Act in consultation with agency heads having approved and appropriated funds for projects under Title III of the Act. Section 310, Critical Items. The head of each agency engaged in procurement for the national defense is delegated the authority of the President under Section so on to take appropriate action to ensure that critical components, critical technology items, essential materials, and industrial resources are available from reliable sources when needed to meet defense requirements during peacetime, graduated mobilization, and national emergency. We're not talking about some big emergency situation that's going to kick all this into gear, people. We're talking about this is the new way of life for America. Implementation of these controls under peacetime. Or graduated mobilization, not really sure what that means. I guess the slowly implemented martial law and national emergency. Appropriate action may include restricting contract solicitations to reliable sources, restricting contract solicitations to domestic sources pursuant to statutory authority, stockpiling critical components, and developing substitutes for critical components or critical technology items. So they reserve the right to restrict contract solicitations or restrict to reliable sources or to domestic sources. So they can take your business away if you're not interested in cooperating.
You know what I'd like to know, Angie, is, when did this ever meet committee somewhere?
It did.
Anywhere.
It's an executive order.
I get that. But things that, are all encompassing like this, that affect the entire structure and our way of life here in this country, that, for crying out loud, that just the stroke of a pen, what
Right.
the stroke of a pen can do.
I don't even know how to respond to this executive order, other than to say that
I know how to. I'm going to wipe my rear end with it. That's what I'm going to do with it, because this is, I mean, I know that people would say, well, they'll try to carry it out. Yeah, I understand that, but it's more about fear. It's more about, we're going to come get you.
right.
The whole point of them releasing it on Saturday, though, I was asked that earlier, why would they release it on the weekend?
Yeah.
Well, they released it on the weekend because a Saturday is like the dead day in the news cycle, where it's always like entertainment news and just time wasting crap. Really, there's never anything there. The only time anything ever comes out on a Saturday is if something comes out breaking news and the news pounces all over it because there's really nothing else out there. And they knew that this would get buried in the headlines because it's St. Patty's Day.
Right.
So it comes out at the Friday, the day before, the night before St. Patty's Day, on a St. Patty's Day weekend. No one's going to see this till Monday. It'll already be 3-4 days old, and there'll be something, I'm sure, between now and Monday morning to, Tim brought up a good point. What's going to come out Monday morning that's going to, overshadow this and be something else? It'll be the new news. It'll be the new, oh my God, we have to focus on this. Don't worry that they're, the Constitution, in their eyes, is now null and void.
And the same way they did this, that they just did now, they did, the exact same thing with NDAA. They stretched it out, and they waited till New Year's Eve, December 31st, when, they knew everybody's going to be drinking or hungover the next day. And then that's the day that Obama, with a heavy heart, signs the National Defense Authorization Act.
Right.
So, and now they do it again the exact same way here. On a drinking holiday, I guess you could say.
Look, let's get something straight. If your spouse is caught doing something like cheating on you, and all your friends tell you, no, give him another chance, and you give him another chance, and they do it again, And would you go and give them a third and a fourth and a fifth time, or would you get rid of them?
Yeah.
Well,
Gone.
that's the same way you got to look at this with the government. It's a relationship we have with this government. They are treating us like we're an abused spouse. They're beating us up. They're verbally abusing us. They're physically abusing us. They're trying to use intimidation and fear to keep us in line. And at the end of the day, it's because they fear us. And every day they get more and more fearful. And it's being projected out onto the public by doing things like what you see with the NDAA and this executive order and everything else. Norman, or not Norman, Mineta, Secretary of Transportation, listen to me.
Leon Panetta.
Yeah, Panetta, the Secretary of Defense. His whole thing with the Marines in Afghanistan, what does that show you? That shows you that he's afraid. It shows you that they're all afraid. They are
He,
so fearful, it's not even funny, and that's why they're doing this stuff. They're acting this way because they are afraid.
because yeah, he did that because he knows he's committing treason. These people work for us. It is not the other way around. I don't care what they say or how many times they insist that we work for them. It's just simply not the case. And it's time to fire these people. They're not doing their jobs. And they're damn sure not going to
And not
tell
just fire
us.
them, but hold them accountable for the treasonous and seditious things that they've done.
That's
The
Absolutely.
right.
the millions of people that they're responsible for, being removed from the planet, disappearing, all those deaths. They all need to be held. I mean, I'm down for firing them, but I want everybody to make sure that they understand that these people also, at the end of the day, need to be held accountable, and that means punishing them. That doesn't mean putting them in jail and patting their asses and being all nice to them and giving them 3 hots and a cot, because they certainly didn't afford that to any of those little kids that they dropped bombs on and blew to pieces that didn't do anything. So,
Popeye, what is the punishment for treason?
death.
Yeah.
Right. That's right. I'm
Yep.
not saying I'm going to kill anybody or we should kill anybody. I'm
Nope.
saying that
Be
by
tried
law,
and found guilty,
that's
and
right.
punished accordingly, and that's by the rules on the books. They're always throwing it in our faces. We have to play by the rules. Well, these are the rules on the books. But see, they don't want to play by the rules if it doesn't favor them. The only time they play by the rules is when they make the rules, and the
Right.
rules are always slanted in their favor.
And,
It's,
And
and
they,
let's
all
make
this stuff is illegal and seditious and treasonous as far as I'm concerned.
let's make a distinction between the two sides here too. I mean, we are trying to preserve the Constitution. All of us, everybody that's listening right now, we're trying to preserve the Constitution. These other people, they're trying to take it away from you every single way they possibly can, and they've got their hooks in it pretty bad right now, guys.
that's right, Tim. That's absolutely right. We cannot allow them to get away with what they're planning on doing. Uh, I don't care what has to be done. I would like it if they would come to their senses so that things don't have to get ugly, but we do not have to and should never surrender to this kind of totalitarian, treasonous control, ever. Section 312, modernization of equipment. The head of each agency engaged in the procurement for national defense under presidential authority may utilize the authority of Title III of the Act to guarantee the purchase or lease of advanced manufacturing equipment and any related services with respect to such equipment for the purposes of the Act. In considering Title III, the head of each agency engaged in procurement for the national defense shall provide a strong preference for proposals submitted by small business suppliers or subcontractors in accordance with section so on and so on. So they're saying that they will give preference to proposals that are submitted by small businesses or subcontractors. But these people are being forced to work for the government anyway. Part 4, voluntary agreements and advisory committees. Let's see. Section 401, delegations. The authority of the president under sections, names the sections, is delegated to the heads of agencies, otherwise delegated authority under this order. The status of the use of such delegations shall be furnished by the Secretary of Homeland Security. Advisory committees. The authority of the President under section, gives the section, and delegated in section 401 of this order relating to establishment of advisory committees shall be exercised only after consultation with and accordance with guidelines and procedures established by the Administrator of General Services. We have to ask permission for everything, basically. Section 403, regulations. The Secretary of Homeland Security, after approval of the Attorney General and after consultation by the Attorney General with the Chairman of the Federal Trade Commission, shall promulgate rules pursuant to section, gives the section, incorporating standards and procedures by which voluntary agreements and plans of action may be developed and carried out. Such rules may be adopted by other agencies to fulfill rulemaking requirement of section 708. Gives the remainder of the section. Part 5, employment of personnel. Section 501, National Defense Executive Reserve. National Defense Executive Reserve, okay? This is a reserve corps under the executive branch for national defense. A, in accordance with section, gives the section, there is established in the executive branch a National Defense Executive Reserve, or NDER, composed of persons of recognized expertise from various segments of the private sector and from government, except for full-time federal employees, because they already work for the government, for training for employment in executive positions in the federal government in the event of a national defense emergency. The Secretary of Homeland Security shall issue necessary guidance for the NDER program, which was the National Defense Executive Reserve program, including appropriate guidance for establishment, recruitment, training, and monitoring and activation of NDER units, okay? They're going to be drafting people to serve him under these units, under the National Defense Executive Reserve Corps, and shall be responsible for the overall coordination of the NDER program. Okay, so it's under the Secretary of Homeland Security, and he's going to be issuing guidance for how to run these corps of slave labor. The authority of the President under Section 710, gives the section, to determine periods of national defense emergency is delegated to the Secretary of Homeland Security. He's now got presidential authority to determine periods of national defense emergency. If he says it's an emergency for national defense, then it is. C, the head of an agency may implement section, gives the section, of this order with respect to NDER operations in such agency. D, the head of each agency with an NDER unit may exercise the authority under section, so on and so on. That's presidential authority. The head of each unit may exercise presidential authority to employ civilian personnel when activating all or part of its NDER unit. You will have to serve this if they ask you to, or sorry, if they tell you to. The exercise of this authority shall be subject to the provisions of, gives the section, of this order and shall not be redelegated. Congress or the Senate or any other civilian oversight agency does not have a say-so in how this is going to be carried out. That's what that means.
That's amazing.
Section E, the head of any agency may activate an NDER unit in whole or in part upon the written determination of the Secretary of Homeland Security that an emergency affecting the national defense exists and that the activation of the unit is necessary to carry out the emergency program functions of the agency. Let me explain what that means. The head of any agency, all of the heads of agency that he described up towards the beginning, which was the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Secretary of Agriculture, the Secretary of Energy, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Secretary of Transportation, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Commerce. Any of those secretaries at any time can go to the Department of Homeland Security and say to them that we have a situation that we believe constitutes a national defense and we need a slave labor corps. Okay? That's what that's talking about. So I'm going to read that again so that you understand what this says. Consultants, the head of each agency, otherwise delegated functions under this order, is delegated the authority of the president to employ persons of outstanding experience. I'm sorry, wait a minute, I'm getting ahead of myself. The head of each agency may exercise authority to employ civilian personnel when activating all or part of its NDER unit. The exercise of this authority shall be subject to the provisions of, gives the section of this order, and shall not be redelegated. The head of any agency may activate an NDER unit in whole or in part upon the written determination of the Secretary of Homeland Security that an emergency affecting the national defense exists and that activation of the unit is necessary to carry out the emergency program functions of the agency. If people are not working hard enough to get things done, then they can activate one of these presidential national defense executive reserve units of composed of civilian slave laborers, essentially, that have to serve this unit whenever they say that an emergency exists and gets permission from the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Okay. Prior to activating the unit, the head of the agency shall notify in writing the assistant to the president for Homeland Security and counterterrorism of the impending activation. Okay. Section 502, consultants. How do we know that they're talking about slave labor? We're going to read it right now. The head of each agency, otherwise delegated functions under this order, is delegated authority of the president, presidential authority, to employ persons of outstanding experience and ability without compensation, and to employ experts, consultants, or organizations. The authority delegated by this section may not be redelegated. So these heads of these agencies are given presidential authority to employ persons of outstanding experience and ability, in other words, specialists in their field, okay, without compensation, and to employ experts, consultants, or organizations without compensation. This is slave labor. Popeye, anything to contribute to that?
I actually got, I had a conversation with somebody about this earlier, and they were like, well, I don't know if, how are they going to get people to work for them if they don't pay them? And I started laughing, and I'm like, slave labor. They were like, but you'd have to pay somebody or else they wouldn't work. And I was like, no, do you know anything about history? Like, for real, do you read anything? Stalin's gulags, Hitler's, work camps, his prison camps. Do you read at all? People amaze me when their level of not wanting to believe this.
Denial.
Yeah, like, oh no, come on, it's in your face. I had somebody tell me earlier, I don't want to believe it, even though it's from it's on the White House website. Are you sure that Anonymous didn't like make this as a fake page and somehow put it into their website? And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is the real deal. It was released by the White House. I would bet money on it. But are you sure, Popeye? Are you really sure about this? Because I don't know. It could be fake. No, this isn't disinfo because it's so in your face, just out of control that people don't want to believe that this is real. I mean, that's
Right.
how Orwellian this is. That's how out of control this is.
By the way, for those that are interested and want to get to it quickly, that section that discussed consultants without compensation was section 502 under part 5. Okay. Let's move on. Part 6, labor requirements. Okay. Now these are the requirements in order to gather and train these slave labor forces. Section 601, Secretary of Labor. The Secretary of Labor, in coordination with the Secretary of Defense and the heads of other agencies as deemed appropriate by the Secretary of Labor, shall 1. Collect and maintain data necessary to make a continuing appraisal, this is an ongoing program, of the national workforce needs for the purposes of national defense, okay? It's talking about the nation's workforce. the slave labor force. 2. Upon request by the Director of Selective Service, and in coordination with the Secretary of Defense, assist the Director of Selective Service in development of policies regulating the induction and deferment of persons for duty in the armed services. So they're talking about reinstituting the draft, okay? The induction and deferment of persons for duty in the armed services. This is under the Director of Selective Service and the Secretary of Defense. 3. Upon the request from the head of an agency with authority under this order, consult with that agency with respect to 1. The effect of contemplated actions on labor demand and utilization. In other words, how this is going to affect labor demand and utilization. 2, the relation of labor demand to materials and facilities requirements. And 3, such other matters as will assist in making the exercise of priority and allocations functions consistent with the effective utilization and distribution of labor. 4. Upon request from the head of an agency with authority under this order, 1. Formulate plans, programs, and policies for meeting the labor requirements of actions to be taken for national defense purposes. And 2. Estimate training needs to help address national defense requirements and promote necessary and appropriate training programs. In other words, they're going to be, taking people and training them. So can anybody say FEMA camp?
Re-education camps, they call them.
Yeah. 5. Develop and implement an effective labor management relations policy, in other words, a propaganda policy, to support the activities and programs under this order. Let me read that again. Develop and implement an effective labor management relations policy. How best to propagandize this? To support the activities and programs under this order with the cooperation of other agencies as deemed appropriate by the Secretary of Labor, including the National Labor Relations Board, the Federal Labor Relations Authority, and the National Mediation Board, and the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service. B. All agencies shall cooperate with the Secretary of Labor upon request for the purposes of this section to the extent permitted by law. What? What part of any of this is permitted by law?
Yeah.
None of it. Not a single bit of it. Part 7, Defense Production Act Committee. Section 701. The Defense Production Act Committee. The Defense Production Act Committee shall be composed of the following members in accordance with, gives the section. Okay, so all of these people I'm about to read comprise what they're calling the Defense Production Act Committee. In other words, production for the national defense, nationalization. 1, the Secretary of State. So they're talking about taking over control of every single state, and each Secretary of State will be required to cooperate with the Secretary of Labor. So the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Treasury, the Secretary of Defense, the Attorney General, Secretary of the Interior, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Labor, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Energy, Secretary of Homeland Security, the Secretary of National Intelligence, the Director of the CIA, the Chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, the Administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, and the Administration of General Services. Everything is nationalized. Everything.
Wow, that's like 17 departments.
Yes, it is. It's
Incredible.
exactly 17. That was pretty good, Tim.
It's called creeping socialism.
Oh, there's nothing
Fabian
creeping
socialism,
about
it's
this.
called. And interesting that this came out Friday, and then there's all these stories about, obviously, in the past 6 months with Occupy Wall Street, a lot of the youth of America are talking about, oh, well, socialism might be more acceptable than capitalism because capitalism didn't work and blah, 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 blah. To see what's going on, ladies and gentlemen, I suggest you read a book that's about 50 years old now. It's called None Dare Call It Conspiracy by Gary Allen. If you want to understand what's going on, I swear, the book is old, and when you read it, everything that's happened between the time that he wrote the book and now, he said was going to happen. Like, he called it. Gary, said this, and this, and everything has happened almost to the T, like he said it in the book. So people out there love to praise all these other hosts and filmmakers and all these other people over the course of like the past 20 years saying, Bill Cooper said this or Alex Jones said this. Well, the guy that predates both Cooper and Jones would be Gary Allen. Go read None Dare Call It Conspiracy, and everything that's going on, including this executive order. If you read his book, everything that's going on will make sense. It's just unbelievable. And they're getting the youth ready to accept socialism by, oh, it's horrible. Capitalism is horrible, blah, 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 blah. No, what we have is a mutant form of capitalism that, yes, is horrible and needs to be slain like the dragon it is and put down. But that's not true capitalism.
Right.
And they're getting people mentally to be behind this socialist effort. And socialism I saw this thing RT did today, and it was these kids. This one girl was like, oh, socialism really isn't bad, but people that don't like it try to get everybody else to think it is bad, so they just tell people that it's bad, but it's not. And I was like, oh my God, this girl has no clue. None of these people, half the people they interviewed admittedly didn't even know what socialism was, what it really stood for, but they said they were for it. They have no idea. None. None whatsoever. None.
Well, it seems like everybody's in for a really rude awakening if this is allowed to go on.
And I'm not bashing socialists, okay? What people need to understand is that it's called, what's being pushed right now, it's called Fabian socialism. Again, the only way to understand everything behind it, I would have to do a separate podcast on that itself. You have to look up Gary Allen's book, None Dare Call It Conspiracy. It's not that long. Go read the book, and it'll at least shed some light on some of this, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. But it's basically this new world order system that they're pushing for, under the guise of this socialistic utopia where everybody has equal access to food and health care and money and everything else. But that's actually not what they want.
Right.
Their version of it is much more sinister and evil, and
Right.
they're just trying to get the people to go along with it because they fear those people out in Occupy Wall Street. That's why they have to get people to go out there and infiltrate it and lead them in the wrong direction, or at least try to do so, because they fear all those people out there. Every one of those people, they fear them waking up and realizing the truth about what's going on, and it's inevitable because it's happening, and you can see it exponentially every day, growing and growing and growing. More and more people are starting to realize that what they've been told is lies. 110% lies.
Well, that's why Obama just signed into law too that act that basically forbids your First Amendment rights to protest or to even complain in the presence of one of the monarchical officials that don't want to hear your bullcrap.
Isn't that something, though? Anytime it's
Yeah,
nearby.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. All of this is unbelievable. It's unbelievable to me that people still have their heads plugged up their rear ends and they're not paying attention to or doing anything about this. So
They're
let's
too busy
see
getting
here.
drunk this weekend, Angie, and they're too busy worried about Dancing with the Stars. Maybe this will shake people up.
Right. Let's see. Okay, so it just named all of the department heads that it's appointing. It says right underneath that in Part B, the director of the OMB and the director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy shall be invited to participate in all committee meetings and activities in an advisory role. So every single meeting or activity that these heads and directors are involved in. They also have to invite and include the Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy uh, for the purpose of participating in an advisory role. Okay, the chairperson, as designated by the president, pursuant to gives the section, may invite the heads of other agencies or offices to participate in committee meetings and activities in an advisory role as appropriate. Again, nobody says or does anything without their say-so. Section 702, offsets. The Secretary of Commerce shall prepare and submit to the Congress the annual report required by, states the section, in consultation with the Secretaries of State, the Treasury, the Defense, and Labor, and the United States Trade Representative, the Director of National Intelligence, and the heads of other agencies as appropriate. The heads of agencies shall provide the Secretary of Commerce with such information as may be necessary for the effective performance of this function. Part 8, General Provisions. Section 801, definitions. Okay, now we're going to define what they mean by all of these terms. And this is as eye-opening and enlightening as the actual order itself. So please pay attention to it and print it out and go back and read them to yourself so that you really understand what's going on and what's being said here. Section 801, definitions. In addition to the definitions under Section 702 of the Act, the following definitions apply throughout this order. A, civil transportation includes movement of persons and property by all modes of transportation in interstate, intrastate, meaning within your own state or within a state, or foreign commerce within the United States, its territories and possessions, and the District of Columbia, and related public storage and warehousing, ports, services, equipment and facilities such as transportation carrier, shop, and repair facilities. Civil transportation also shall include direction, control, and coordination of civil transportation capacity, regardless of ownership, meaning that you will not be able to drive your own car. Your car is not your own anymore. You cannot travel without permission. Okay, civil transportation also, I'm reading it again, shall include direction, control, and transportation of and coordination of civil transportation capacity regardless of ownership. Civil transportation shall not include transportation owned or controlled by the Department of Defense. In other words, the military doesn't have to ask for permission. They just go where they want, when they want. Use of petroleum and gas pipelines and coal slurry pipelines.
By the way, more of Agenda 21 type speak.
Right, right. So they also talk about the control of use of petroleum and gas pipelines, coal slurry pipelines, used only to supply energy production facilities directly. B, energy means all forms of energy, including petroleum, gas, both natural and manufactured, electricity, solid fuels, including all forms of coal, coke, coal chemicals, coal liquefaction, and coal gasification, solar, wind, other types of renewable energy, atomic energy, and the production, conservation, use, control, and distribution, including pipelines of all these forms of energy. Okay, did we hear that? Did we hear that? They're talking about rationing energy, taking control of everything that has to do with energy and rationing it out. I'm going to read that one more time. Energy means all forms of energy, including petroleum, gas, both natural and manufactured, electricity, solid fuels, including all forms of coal, coke, coal chemicals, coal liquefaction, and coal gasification, solar, wind, and other types of renewable energy, atomic energy, and the production, conservation, use, control, and distribution, including pipelines of all of these forms of energy. Okay? Farm equipment means equipment, machinery, and repair parts manufactured for use on farms in connection with the production or preparation for market use of food resources. So they're also taking over all farm equipment as well as repair parts manufactured for the use on farms in connection with the production or preparation for market use of food resources. D, fertilizer means any product in combination of products that contain one or more of the elements nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium for the use as plant nutrient. E, food resources, okay? What does it mean when they say they're taking over anything that has to do with food resources? Here's the definition. Means all commodities and products, simple, mixed, or compound, in other words, raw, processed, manufactured, it doesn't matter. All commodities and products or complements to such commodities or products, in other words, things that have anything to do with the production or manufacture of these products, that are capable of being ingested by either human beings or animals, irrespective of other uses to which such commodities or products may be put at all stages of processing from the raw commodity to the products thereof in vendable form for human or animal consumption. Food resources also means potable water packaged in commercially marketable containers, all starches, sugars, vegetable, animal, or marine fats and oils, seed, cotton, hemp, flax fiber, but does not mean any such material after it loses its identity as an agricultural commodity or agricultural product. Guys,
What a mouthful.
I mean, they're talking about controlling anything and everything that has to do with food or the production of food for humans or animals. And it doesn't matter if those items could be used for other purposes, purposes other than food. They still will include it in the
Mhm.
confiscation and control.
Well, you know the old line from what was it, Kissinger or something, that you control oil, you control nations, and you control food, and you control the people. And it looks like they got a good handle on that right now.
Right.
It's all part of Agenda 21. This is
I mean,
just fortifying it on this end.
no,
He's obvious, and it's not Obama. It's obviously he's a puppet for somebody bigger than him, and he's just doing what he's told, and he's falling
right.
lockstep, just like he's supposed to.
This is the implementation of it all. And how is it ever a good thing to have the government in complete and total control of everything that has to do with food for people or for animals, at every single stage of production, manufacture, distribution? I mean, everything. This is horrific. Horrific. This cannot be allowed to happen. F, food resource facilities. That means any place where they're doing anything that has to do with food. Uh, Food resource facilities means plants, machinery, vehicles, including on a farm, and other facilities required for the production, processing, distribution, storage, including cold storage, of food resources, and for the domestic distribution of farm equipment and fertilizer, excluding the transportation thereof. So they're taking over everything, including packing plants, storage facilities, cold storage, you name it. G, functions include powers, duties, authority, responsibilities, and discretion. Okay, so when they say that the Secretary of Defense is in control of all functions of a certain sector, that means that his functions include all power, duties, authority, responsibilities, and discretion. I find that to be a very odd
Yeah.
classification for functions. That he's got in other words, there's no more court processes. There's no more right to a trial or none of it. It's none of it. All gone. Discretion is under whoever's in charge of whatever said agency that Obama appoints.
And what do you want to bet they'll use more?
Yeah.
They'll lean
Yeah.
on that discretion more than anything.
Of course, right, of course. No more due process, no more redress, none of it. H, heads of each agency engaged in procurement for the national defense, so that's a whole phrase, means the heads of the departments of state, justice, the interior, homeland security, the office of the director of national intelligence, the CIA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, the General Services Administration, and all other agencies with authority delegated under Section 201 of this order. Health resources means, here we go, we're talking about hospitals and drugstores and anything that has to do with what they call health resources. Means drugs, they're taking over and controlling all drugs and medication. Biological products, that means anything that has to do with supplements or medicinal plants or anything that's included here. Medical devices, materials, facilities, okay, that means everything, doctor's offices, hospitals, urgent care centers, you name it. Health supplies, services, and equipment required to diagnose, mitigate, or prevent the impairment of, improve, treat, cure, or restore the physical or mental health conditions of the population. Okay, they're taking over every health resources. And that's not just physical health. This also includes mental health. Okay, that's very disturbing. National defense means, and this of course is what this act is all about, and it's the justification used for everything they're doing for the purposes of national defense. So let's specify what that means. National defense means programs for military. Okay, so just in case anybody questioned whether or not we're talking about a martial law situation, there's your answer. Programs for military and energy production or construction, military or critical infrastructure assistance to any foreign nation. Okay, so they're also talking about national defense, meaning military or critical infrastructure assistance to any foreign nation. They're not just talking about the national defense of the United States. What does that mean? That means that everything in this act can also apply to, say, the state of Israel if they attack Iran and they need assistance, or any other country. Okay, this is what they're talking about when they say national defense. It includes other countries as well. Very disturbing, illegal, unconstitutional, unbelievable. So military or critical infrastructure assistance to any foreign nation, homeland security, stockpiling, space, and any directly related activity. Such term includes emergency preparedness activities conducted pursuant to Title VI of the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, gives the section, and critical infrastructure protection and restoration. Guys, what do you think about that?
I think they're taking over every aspect of everything. That's what I think.
They're talking about foreign nations. They're talking about stockpiling. They're talking about control of space-related anything, satellites, everything.
And it's such a well thought out, all encompassing plan. They've obviously put some mental effort into this thing. And so you think, okay, in what disaster scenario do we hit this at? And then you remember that they've got peacetime, in there as well. So
a new way of life, essentially. Okay, now that's just the description of the definition of the term national defense as it is used throughout this order. Okay. K, offsets means compensation practices required as a condition of purchase in either government to government or commercial sales of defense articles and/or defense services as defined by the Arms Export Control Act and the International Traffic in Arms Regulations. Why is it that the term offsets is talking about compensation practices required as a condition of purchase either in government to government transactions, or commercial sales of defense articles. What does this mean? This means that they're taking over any commercial institution that sells anything having to do with arms. Okay? That's what that means. He's talking about taking over gun shops and manufacturers and distributors, ammunition shops, manufacturers, distributors, sellers, uh, you name it. That's what they're talking about when they say offsets in this order. The next one is special priorities assistance. What does that mean? What are special priorities assistance? It means action by resource departments, all the departments named in this order, to assist with expediting deliveries, placing related, what is that, rated or related? I'm sorry, placing rated orders. I don't know if that's a typo or not. Locating suppliers, resolving production or delivery conflicts between various rated orders. I guess that means rated in order of priority. Addressing problems that arise in the fulfillment of a rated order or other action authorized by a delegated agency, and determining the validity of rated orders. So that's what special priorities assistance means. In other words, it is the special priorities assistance is the service that the agency is going to provide to you in regard to your carrying out their orders. Okay, rated means I guess priority, since their orders are going to be taking priority over any business that a commercial or private business or industry might have. So they will be providing you special priorities assistance, or I guess you could say encouragement under military control. Okay. The next one, M, strategic and critical materials, means materials including energy that, one, would be needed to supply the military, industrial, and essential civilian needs of the United States during a national emergency, and two, are not found or produced in the United States in sufficient quantities to meet such need, or are vulnerable to the termination or reduction of the availability of the material. Now, we talked about this earlier. This is the meaning of their term strategic and critical materials. So what this is talking about is the is previously stated intentions to assure the acquisition of materials necessary to the national defense. So obviously, it's as it specifies here, it's talking about resources and materials also outside of the United States that are not manufactured here. So I'll read that again so that everybody understands it. Strategic and critical materials means materials including energy that, one, would be needed to supply the military, industrial, and essential civilian needs of the United States during a national emergency, and two, are not found or produced in the United States in sufficient quantities to meet such need, and are vulnerable to the termination or reduction of the availability of the material. So resources that belong to other people in other countries, okay? And if the said country that is the owner of these natural resources or other resources that we need that we don't have, this is what it was talking about previously when it said acquisition. Okay, so we're talking about military force used to acquire these resources from people that that it belongs to.
That's the old what's our oil doing under your sand?
Yeah.
Right.
I was going to say that's old hat though. Now they're just saying, hey, it's part of our national defense, our national security.
Right.
Yep.
The next one, N, water resources, means all usable water from all sources within the jurisdiction of the United States that can be managed, controlled, and allocated to meet emergency requirements, except water resources does not include usable water that qualifies as food resources. Section 802, General. Except as otherwise provided in Section 802C of this order, the authorities vested in the President by title, so on and so on, are delegated to the head of each agency in carrying out the delegated authorities under the Act and this order by the Secretary of Labor in carrying out Part 6 of this order, and the Secretary of Treasury in exercising the functions assigned in the Executive Order 11858 as amended. Okay, so that's talking about delegating presidential authority to these advisors and
These people are given a lot of power.
yeah, unbelievable power and discretion as well. So what does that do? What's the effect of that? When Hitler gave his henchmen authority, I guess executive authority to do whatever the hell they wanted and use their own
Mhm.
discretion, they became inhuman, essentially. They just so abused that authority, and that's what this is designed to do. It's a corrupting power. That's why there's so much emphasis placed on the fact that it is presidential authority. It's guaranteed to corrupt and to cause
Yeah,
all kinds of atrocities.
certainly limited in the hands of a few.
Right, right. So B, the authorities that may be exercised and performed pursuant to Section 802 of this order shall include 1. The power to redelegate authorities and to authorize the successive redelegation of authorities to agencies, officers, and employees of the government, and 2. The power of subpoena under Section 705 of the Act, and then it gives the specified section with respect to authorities delegated in parts 2, 3, and 702 of this order, and 2, the functions assigned to the Secretary of Treasury in Executive Order 11858 as amended, provided that the subpoena power referenced in subsections 1 and 2 shall be utilized only after the scope and purpose of the investigation, inspection, or inquiry to which the subpoena relates have been defined either by appropriate officer identified in Section 802 or this order by such other person or persons as the officer shall designate. So what this means is that nobody under this authority can be subpoenaed to testify in court or anywhere else except uh, as authorized by the appropriate officer identified in Section 802 of this order. So that means that if it is not one of the president's henchmen who is the designated officer issuing the subpoena, then it means nothing. It doesn't have to be considered, looked at, followed, or anything else. If it's not,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So only the president's appointees can issue a subpoena to any one of these people. So that's, as I said earlier, we're talking about executive immunity. Okay? What do you think about that?
That's incredible. I mean, they've got it set up all the way around,
I think Danny Glover answered that question in the end of Lethal Weapon 2 perfectly. What you do when diplomatic immunity. Yeah, he revoked it. I think these people's diplomatic immunities should be revoked and they should be tried for sedition and treason again.
I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. C. Excluded from the authorities delegated by Section 802A of this order are authorities delegated by Parts 4 and 5 of this order, authorities in Section 721 and 722 of the Act, and the authority with respect to fixing compensation under Section 703 of the Act, and it gives the section. Section 803, authority. I mean, we're almost through this here. A. Executive Order 12919 as of June 3rd, 1994, and Sections 401, 3, and 4 of Executive Order 12656 from November 18th of 1988 are revoked. So he's revoking authority that's been given in other previous executive orders. All other previous issued orders, regulations, rulings, certificates, directives, and other actions relating to any function affected by this order shall remain in effect except as they are inconsistent with this order or are subsequently amended or revoked under proper authority. Nothing in this order shall affect the validity or force of anything done under previous delegations or other assignment of authority under the Act. So this means that every executive order, regulation, ruling, laws, Supreme Court rulings, other court rulings, certificates, directives, actions will not be affected as long as they comply with this order. That's what this is saying. In other words, none of it is any good anymore unless it is in
Yeah,
line with.
everything's null and void unless it abides by the rules of
Right,
dictator Obama or whatever other puppet gets put in that
that's right.
position of power.
Right, and that's what it says. It says that none of those things shall be affected by this order, that they will remain in effect as long as they are except, in other words, unless they are inconsistent with this order or are subsequently amended or revoked under proper authority. So
I'm curious to see all the things that were revoked, what they actually were.
yeah, we'll have to do that research after we're through and see what that was talking about. So B, nothing in this order shall affect the authorities assigned under Executive Order 11858 of May 7, 1975. There's a lot of homework to do here. As amended, except as provided in Section 802 of this order. C, nothing in this order shall affect the authorities assigned under Executive Order 12472 of April 3rd, 1984, as amended. Section 804, General Provisions. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect functions of the Director of OMB relating to budgetary, administrative, or legislative proposals. B, the order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. C, the order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. Let me read that again. This order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, entities, officers, employees, agents, or other persons. So there's no rights or benefits to anybody that is against the United States. Of course, that's something that's at their discretion. It's departments, agencies, entities, officers, employees, agents, or any other person. So if they say that somebody, is attempting to stop this, they have no rights, they have no authority, that's what that's saying.
Wow.
And that's it. Signed, Barack Obama, the White House, March 16th, 2012.
And once again, it skates by without the major media presenting anything to us, about this. Again, just like NDAA, right before, a holiday weekend, one which alcohol is greatly consumed. We had a New Year's Eve for the NDAA, and now you've got St. Patrick's Day. And again, what will happen on Monday? We'll see.
So listen, guys, I'm going to put my husband Joe Joseph back on to close this out with you guys, and for any final comments or anything. We want to thank all the listeners and everybody listening to this who hung with us through this. We know that this is a long podcast. We know that there's a lot of information here, but we literally went through and broke it down section by section so that everybody can really fully grasp the severity of what this is talking about here. And it's extremely serious. We're talking about a complete restructuring of the United States as we know it. Every single aspect, every single function, just total control under the president. He's declaring himself the supreme dictator of the United States. And the only people that have any power for anything are the advisors and the authorities that he delegates. Uh, I would like to see what Congress has to say about this. It's extremely treasonous, and frankly, I
They were
think
already
that
told the other day, Ange. They got told the other day by
exactly
Leon
right.
Panetta that you're
Yeah.
pretty much ceremonial,
Right.
and we don't need you.
Right, and that is what happened. Basically, Leon Panetta and General Dempsey went to the Congress and basically, I guess, laid the groundwork for this by saying that, look, we're the ones in charge. We're in control here. You're not, whether you like it or not. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody again, and we'll be putting on my husband, Joe Joseph.
Thank you, Angie. Great job.
Thank you,
Absolutely great.
guys.
Angie Joseph, ladies and gentlemen. Boy, I tell you what, John and Popeye, this is just, chilling stuff. Just one by one, they just keep unloading something new on us. And it's been going on since really, I mean, if you take a look at just since November of 2011 and see how many things have been thrown at us, on November 9th, they did that EAS, the first ever national emergency alert. Why? Went through the whole Cold War, went, through 9/11. Suddenly on November 9th, they decided to do this. And on November 18th, you've got that FEMA continuity of government plan that Joe and Angie uncovered. Later on, the 28th, you've got the NDA bill going through. December 8th, Obama has a strategic implementation plan. February 8th, December 31st, Obama signs NDAA. February 8th, we've got HR 658 comes along. March 13th, FEMA, announces the FEMA Corps. And then now, March 17th, we've got this NDRP, the National Defense Resources Preparedness. It's unbelievable what's happened in just a very short amount of time since November until now.
You know what, guys? This reeks to high heaven of financial collapse. Like the United States not being able to trade or pay their bills.
That's why I said, what the hell are they planning for, or do they know about that they're going to have to require us to be self-sustaining 110% because we won't be able to get anything from anywhere, from any outside sources. So either the economy goes down, or they're going to do something that's going to piss off the entire world. One of the two things. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long podcast this evening, but we needed to break down the entire executive order so everybody could understand it because it's so long. We know most people aren't going to read all the way through it, and there will be things that'll get left out. So we wanted to cover it as much as we could. I urge you to go out and read it yourself. You can go read it at federaljack.com under the title, let me go check it here. Under the title, it's so long I have to scroll up to the top. Obama issues executive order declaring peacetime martial law, bypasses Congress, takes over all resources. You can see it at federaljack.com. Alex Thomas posted a copy of the same executive order over at the intelhub.com, which if you go to the Intel Hub, you can also see all of our previous podcasts on many subjects, including Agenda 21, which was referenced tonight, which I urge you to go check out because Joe and I talk about the planned Ompolis, and a lot of this takeover of transportation and stuff sounds very similar to things that are involved with Agenda 21. So you can see it all dovetails together, ladies and gentlemen. So go check out the older podcast over at the intelhub.com, and they always have new articles up there. You can hear my radio show over on the Orion Talk Radio Network on Wednesday nights and Friday nights, 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Standard Time, Sundays, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can also hear Joe and Tim over at the same place, over at Orion. And their show is on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Standard Time, and Sundays, 7 to 9 Eastern Standard Time. Just go check it out, OrionTalkRadio.com. That's OrionTalkRadio.com. You always check out my site, FederalJack.com. And ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned to the Intel Hub News Brief because we will be bringing you more and more podcasts with more information every week.